Vancouver Corner. The troops, as you gave names to the various crossroads and various places so they could use them as a road map when they moved around. But Vancouver Corner was the location of the 13th Battalion, the Black Wash from Montreal. This is their rear headquarters area in here. 13th Battalion was forward about a kilometer at most. This road that is running up along here was the left-hand boundary of the 3rd Brigade. And you had 13th Battalion, 15th Battalion, because it becomes significant, 8th Battalion, 5th Battalion. The rest of 2 Brigade was well back. 2 Brigade was well back. 1 Brigade wasn't even in the line. 1 Brigade was on the other side of Ypres doing some training, waiting to go. The night of the 22nd of April, early morning, the 22nd of April, the first thing people knew that something was a bit strange was when the sentries at the forward part of 13th Battalion on the left saw the Algerian division, which was on their left, pick up and start running like mad, going in that direction. Horses, guns, men fleeing to the rear without a particular amount of firing more than normal. What had happened is the Germans had used poison gas for the very first time. It hit the Algerians. As the men started to drown in their own blood, because that's what the gas was doing to them, they fled from the battle, leaving an entire gap of about 10 miles open with a free run into Ypres and risking the loss of Ypres. The Canadians, who had never been in action before, suddenly had to spring into action. The Germans, coming this way, turned their attention on the Canadians again with poison gas. Choking, not knowing what was happening to them, the Canadians started to swing back to cover the gap. The first Victoria Cross of the war was won just over here, about 200 yards away. Lance Corporal Fred Fisher, back here in the battalion rear area, was grabbed with his Lewis gun section and sent out there to try and cut down the Germans that were advancing, trying to follow up behind the Algerians. He did that. He went with his section. The section was killed. He continued to fire, holding off entirely unsupported. He held off an advancing German battalion with his Lewis gun. He unfortunately lost his life in that action, and his name is recorded on the Menin Gate as one of the fallen that was never found. It was utter chaos. You have to understand, complete chaos. Nobody expected it. Lines of communications were poor. People did not know what was going on. The artillery shelling started to come, and the gas was drifting across the entire front. The medical officer of the 15th Battalion recognized the smell of the gas and realized that it could be neutralized if you would urinate on a handkerchief and suck it and put it in over your face, your mouth and nose. And that's what the soldiers started to do. But now one of the true tragedies of our initial Canadian contribution, something sadly that you politicians are here should perhaps think of. War profiteering and awarding things to cronies resulted in Canadians being sent over here with webbing that wasn't comfortable, but far more important, with a rifle that wouldn't shoot. The 15th Battalion, in the line up here, was being attacked by 2 to 3 battalions of Germans, and their rifles started to jam. When you fired the Ross rifle at rapid fire or in dirty conditions, they wouldn't work. And you had a scene, a ghastly scene, of people writing about men in tears with a useless weapon in their hand, being prepared to use it as a club. But of course the Germans were able to sit off at 200 or 300 meters and shoot at them with deadly effect. But they didn't run away. They held their ground in the face of this circumstance. In the 8th Battalion, who later became known as the Little Black Devils, it was like something out of a cowboy movie, where the best shots were put up on the parapet, and 2 other men were beating the rifles with either an entrenching tool or their boot to get the bolt back, to get the round out, so they could drive it another round up and hand it up to the man who could shoot, like you see in the cowboy movies of the settlers and their wives handing them the rifles. That's what went on here. The extraordinary courage of the Canadians, and still they didn't break. We were able to stop the Germans long enough here for reinforcements to be pulled up along this road to try and block the road to Ypres. Any battalion that wasn't under command of someone, was in rest, was thrown under command of the Canadians, and they held this ground along here. One of the great, courageous but tragic attacks took place back here about 3 kilometers. By the time night had fallen, the line was still very loose. There were many, many gaps in the line, and there was a hill feature back here about 4K, a wooded feature known as Kitchener's Wood. And the Germans were moving towards it. If they were there when dawn broke, they'd be dominating all the run into the Yser Canal and Ypres. So that
the cathedral in Ypres, rebuilt after the war. Cloth Hall in Ypres, or Ypres, and we're looking around the town square. Very, very pretty place. Of course, it was largely destroyed during the First World War, but completely rebuilt. And, approaching the Menin Gate, and up ahead is Bob Kilgore, the Liberal Party whip. The Menin Gate contains the names of 55,000 British Empire soldiers with no known graves. There are another 35,000 on the Tynecott Cemetery. Was rebuilt after the war, as was the whole city. A labor of love to do all this restoration. Every evening at 8 o'clock, since the end of the last World War, the last post is played to remember those who died in the First World War, and whose names are on this gate, including the name of Captain Merritt of the 16th Canadian Scottish, Colonel Merritt's father. The Menin Gate from the other side. Flying over now, we're practicing for a fly pass. The Queen will be here tomorrow on November 11th. The Essex Wood Cemetery. On May the 3rd, 1915, this was a medical dressing station where Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, then a major, wrote the most famous poem of World War I in Flanders Field, after a friend of his had been killed in the Second Battle of Ypres. Colonel McCrae later himself paid the supreme price. He overworked himself, contracted pneumonia and meningitis, and died in January of 1918, and is buried at Boulogne. November the 11th, 1998, Mons, Belgium. A city the Canadians liberated. 80 years ago in this hour, in this place, the guns of the Great War were stilled for Canada, the Canadian Expeditionary Force.
Boner, sir. Corporal Boner. Oh, Jay.
What have you got to say 80 years later?
Nothing except that we're very happy to be here, to be alive. Not very privileged to be here. Thank God for that.
And this is Tom Spears, who's 102.
We'll have another one.
The children here to greet the veterans.
Eileen et Kiefer. Daniels. Eileen, elle a 9 ans et Kiefer, il a 10 ans.
Non, il conduit sa voiture et il joue au golf. Il est assis là-bas, je pense, oui. C'est le monsieur là-bas qui a 100 et 2 ans.
Yes, you got it. I'm a little slow today.
This is the mayor.
Thank you.
And the governor of the province. They're greeting the vets. With Veterans Affairs Minister Mifflin.
This is another one of our vets.
Vous devez vous souvenir de ça. Because c'était trop dur dans ce temps-là, I know.